Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes running fast if you're the Car Chick. Now, here she is.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Straight Shift. Today I have a very special guest, my friend Chaya. She lives up in Wisconsin, which y'all know was my old stomping grounds and where I learned a lot of my car care and car control skills, most of it not legally. But Chaya and I bonded because we both have this passion for educated women. So Chaya, welcome. And I'm going to let you pronounce your last name because I can't pronounce it.
Even my fiance can't pronounce my last name. I'm Chaya Milchtein, and some of you might know me as the Mechanic Shop Femme.
And I think that's such a fantastic brand, and you've done so much amazing things over the years with educating women, empowering women. You know, we both share that passion, and you're a fantastic writer. So I'm really excited about that. But I think we need to back up for the folks that have not heard of you, have not, maybe not read one of your articles or taken one of your classes. How did you get started in this business? Because there's not that many of us women in this industry. Well, how did you go down this path in your life, my dear?
So it was actually completely random, Leanne. I was aging out of the foster care system, and I was desperately looking for a job. However, my passions were all around social justice and organizing, and that didn't quite fit the mold for your typical retail or fast food jobs that folks would get at around, 18 years old.
Yeah, those aren't really paying type positions.
Right. And social justice work doesn't always pay.
No, it doesn't.
In fact, it usually doesn't pay. So I ended up in this weird spot where I was looking and looking and looking, and I couldn't find anything. And finally, I decided to write my story down and start a GoFundMe and say, hey, maybe some people will be willing to help me out because I don't know what I'm going to do after I age out, and I don't have any funds to get an apartment and take care of myself, and not really anybody behind me to back me up. So that GoFundMe led me to the automotive industry, interestingly enough.
And that's so fantastic that you went down that route because you came from such a challenging background. You know, even women who, I'll admit I came from an extraordinarily privileged background and still have had to fight my way to earn respect and to be able to make a living in this industry. But I'm so amazed at your strength and your intelligence and your ingenuity and your determination. You know, coming out of the foster care system with diddly squat for support. That's really amazing. You go, girl.
Thank you. So this GoFundMe, what happened was somebody, it got shared internationally.
Ooh.
And somebody saw it. Actually, their father saw it, lived in Chicago, and sent it over to them. And they lived in Milwaukee. They were a federal agent for the Postal Service. And they did all the background checks on me to make sure I was legit. And then reached out to me. And they were like, hi, so I could give you money, but money is just one factor in this. What do you need that will actually be helpful? And I was like, well, a job would help me more than a small amount of money. Way, way, way more. And lucky for me, somehow she, one of her friends now, I would say, I guess would be a friend, really the au pair for her children when they were growing up, was now the HR manager at the Sears department store in Milwaukee, in Glendale.
I know that
and
one.
she wanted to bring me in for an interview, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna go work at a retail store. I don't know anything about retail, but okay, I'm down. So when at the end of the interview, she said, so Chaya, what department do you want to work in? I'm like, tell me, what's the departments that make the most money?
There you go.
And she said to me, well, that would either be the auto center or appliances. But in order to get into the auto center, you have to have a driver's license.
Ah, true.
I'm like, great, interesting. Well, the auto center sounds right up my alley because I'm all about, empowerment and being a, strong human being. I was like, worst case scenario, even if I hate it, I'll learn something that will do me good during the course of my life. So that set off this chain reaction. I had to go and learn how to drive in a record amount of time. And then eventually, I didn't know anything about cars. I had never been behind the wheel of a car. I mean, the most I had ever done is put gas into my mother's car when I was a teenager because she said it was important that everybody should know how to do that.
Yes.
So here we are. I'm, 18 years old and I'm working at Sears Auto Center and I'm having nightmares about putting the wrong size tires on people's cars and tires attacking me, worried that I don't know enough to do this job. But I had great support people in the industry, both there at Sears in Milwaukee and then eventually at Sears in Brooklyn, that really taught me the important foundational elements that have done me really well in my automotive journey since then.
My husband started his automotive career at the Sears Auto Center. Obviously these have all closed down because Sears has gone out of business. But he said the same thing, that they had a really, really great training program. And it's nice to hear that they were supportive of you as well, being a woman coming into the industry and not even knowing how to drive. I mean, that's funny. I love that.
The person who trained me, her name was Tiffany. She was a woman and she had worked at a Jaguar dealership before she came to Sears. And eventually, once I moved back to Wisconsin to become the area manager, she was the assistant manager at a different Sears Auto Center location. So she really helped me. She was like, "Don't worry, Kaya, I got you. I'll teach you everything you need to know," and took it from there.
And that's what we really need. And I think that's something that the women that you and I both know, because we have a lot of mutual friends in this world across the country with the women in the industry, we have been really good about supporting each other and mentoring each other and giving each other opportunities. Sometimes I think better than a lot of other industries. I came out of the IT world and it wasn't really the case there, but I have found it to be extremely supportive in the automotive industry, at least amongst all of us women who are trying to make it in this world. So I'm glad that you had that same kind of great support.
It's been incredibly great for me since I found the online women in automotive communities, to be able to see the just incredible way that women interact with each other, and not just women. Recently, I wrote an article for Daily Extra magazine in Canada, which is an LGBT publication, about how how queer and trans mechanics find communities within the automotive industry as well, because hypermasculinity doesn't just affect women. And these communities of women are creating communities within them for queer and trans mechanics of all genders, and welcoming them in a way that men have never done in this industry. So it's pretty unique.
And that's a whole nother kind of level to the challenges. I mean, it's hard enough for just women in general, especially on the service side of the industry, because even my husband struggled. It's one of the reasons that he left that industry entirely at the end of last year, was because it's not just a male dominated industry, but it's very much a, get out the measuring stick, gruff, rude guy, very guy kind of industry, and they're all macho. And, there can be a lot of real jerks in that industry that make it difficult for women to do well in that. But for members of the queer community, I can't even imagine a trans mechanic, or a gay mechanic. That's got to be just astronomically more difficult than it is just for women in general.
Yeah, I talked to Jennifer Nelson, who worked, I think, for 8 or 9 years as a Volkswagen and Audi mechanic. She transitioned, from what I understand, before her career. And that was what, one of the main stories I featured in this piece was how how this toxic masculinity culture and this, hyper masculinity culture so negatively affects not just the mechanics and not just the employees, but also the customers that come in through the door, because our customers come in all stripes and sizes. And, if we have that culture within our own space, that culture ultimately leaks out to our customers and just bad business.
Oh, absolutely. That's why, Jody DeVere started the whole Ask Patty certified female friendly program, just because women in general over the years have had such negative experiences and dealing with that, patriarchal and toxic masculinity culture in the automotive industry. But I totally see how that comes out and even gets amplified when you're talking about the queer community, which is such a vulnerable community to begin with. But I can't even imagine having to deal with. I mean, I have to like turn on my bitch factor to walk into a mechanic shop and be like, look, guys, don't with the car chick. and even as good as I am at doing that, it still irritates me to no end. And I just can't even imagine how that feels to even more vulnerable members of our community. But I'm glad to see that there are communities developing to support those folks, both inside the industry and as customers having to deal with the industry.
I completely agree. I've had situations even as recently as like 2 months ago going into the dealer to get work covered under warranty, just like a simple nail in the tire and a recall, and leaving and my airbag light is on. And I told them, hey, listen, the computer sent me an email telling me that the airbag light has come on. This has nothing to do with the repairs that you are doing on it. Can you make sure to check it before I get back? And I pick it up with the airbag light still on.
Of course.
I'm like, and it wasn't even, I mean, the car has like 20,000 miles on it. It wasn't like I was trying to get them to pay for something or, oh, ever since you did X repair, this happened. That wasn't the case at all. But it was just hearing anything I had to say was somehow not within their purview.
They just didn't even want to deal with it. So how did you move from, actually schlepping tires in the shop, because tires have to be schlepped, they're heavy, to becoming a writer and teaching these classes? At what point did you make that transition? Because you're not schlepping tires anymore, are you?
I'm not actually just by circumstance, to be quite honest. I was laid off from my full-time job in a collision shop at the beginning of the pandemic. And, I sort of took it as a sign from the universe to, it's time. It's the right kick in the butt. It's time to take off on my own and see how I can change the world from, within my spare bedroom.
Girl, been doing that for years. Don't underestimate the power of a spare bedroom.
It's been amazing. But the shift happened. It's always been important to me to educate my customers. And I felt like that made me a better service advisor and a better service manager, and somebody who I prided myself that my customers can spend $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever they ended up spending and feel like they walked away confident that the work that they did was necessary and they had a fundamental understanding of what needed to be done and why. And that made me really good at what I did.
And that is the biggest challenge for most just people in general who are not real hardcore car people, but especially for women coming in and the mechanic says, oh, well, your car needs blah, 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 blah. And you don't have any idea what those terms are, what those parts are, what they do, what they mean. And no one bothers to explain it to you. Or if they do, they mansplain it or talk down to you.
They just scare you.
Yeah.
Your wheel is going to fall off. You're not going to be able to brake and you're going to kill somebody.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say the name of this dealership group because everybody knows I don't badmouth anybody on my podcast, at least not directly. I do it, indirectly. But I was doing some process and procedure standardization years ago in my former life for a very large dealership group, and literally their procedures for their service department. If the customer is a woman and her brake pads measure less than 50% friction material remaining, you tell her that her brakes are shot and she's going to die on the way home and kill her children if she doesn't change them right now. I mean, first of all, what the hell, are you doing scaring your customers like that? And two, 50% material on your brake pads could last another 2 years.
Seriously.
But brakes are gravy jobs, and they want to sell brake jobs because that's where they make a ton of money, and they know that women will be scared of that, and then they'll say yes.
And in a way, why I left the repair industry to begin with, before I went, when I went into collision. It's the pushing and the forcing these services on these customers in a way that scares them. I mean, when I teach folks, and so I turned that blog into an automotive education business. And part of what I teach people is when a mechanic is trying to scare you, that's a red flag for me. That's a time when I would seriously consider going somewhere else and getting the car double checked to make sure that the information they're giving you is accurate. Because when I can't explain a repair effectively to a customer, and it really is that detrimental safety problem, in every shop I've ever worked at, we would tow the car out of the shop to their home. I mean, that shows that we have invested ourselves in making sure that the customer is safe and to protect our liability. And that means that there's seriously a problem in the car that's not safe. If the shop just lets you drive out of the shop with this major safety issue that's going to kill somebody, there's a red flag there. What's going on?
Right. Or, that we had a situation, years ago when my husband was still in the industry. And this was a case where the customer was from out of town. They were visiting here in Charlotte, and it was actually his daughter. And she was driving this kind of old beat up pickup truck, and she started having some problems with it. So she took it to my husband's shop. And this thing, I cannot believe that any parent would let their child drive this death trap. Tires were bald with the just the cord sticking out on it. The brakes were on the metal backing plate. And they sent their, daughter on a 250-mile road trip in this thing. And so my husband is trying to show her and be on the phone with her dad, who was down in Georgia, here's what's going on. And he's showing her and he's taking pictures and, texting them to the dad saying, there are cords sticking out of these tires. This is, you have no friction material left on the brake pad. It is melting into the backing plate. Trying to convince him that your daughter may very well die on the way home or kill someone else. Still said no.
I think that many people, when they think they're so-called being ripped off by a mechanic, more often than not, it's that the mechanic is recommending maintenance that they've already done because they haven't built a relationship with one person and they don't understand the maintenance intervals for different services. If you understand how often your car needs something, then there's no way somebody can recommend you something to be done for maintenance reasons before then, unless there's a good reason.
Right, because the maintenance intervals and what I tell people about those is, these are kind of general guidelines based on average type of driving, but you have to understand there's also that severe maintenance schedule. And severe
Right.
doesn't mean that you live in Alaska, or you live in the Mojave Desert. If you drive in stop and go traffic like most people do on their commutes, that's more severe according to your car. So how you drive
Absolutely.
can change. If you're doing a lot of towing with your vehicle, then the transmission fluid may need to be changed a little more often because the transmission's working a little bit harder to tow things along with the engine. So you
Absolutely.
have to understand how you're using your vehicle. But again, the mechanics don't necessarily explain this. And I tell people, don't be afraid to say, show me. Let me see a sample of the transmission fluid so I know what color it is. Most people don't know what color it's supposed to be. So if we got to start there,
Mm-hmm.
transmission fluid is supposed to be red. If it's brown, that means it needs to be changed. What color is oil supposed to be? So, and I've found that if a mechanic shop is trying to, because they do like to recommend fluid flushes, because again, that's
Yes.
gravy,
Gravy money.
and you may not need it, which means they didn't actually check your fluid. They simply looked at your balance like, oh, I'm going to see if I can sell them a fluid change, because they're due now. If you ask detailed questions, if they say, hey, you need new brakes. Really? Front brakes or rear brakes? What is the percentage of friction material remaining on my pads? If you ask a question like that, if they don't have an honest answer because they've actually looked at it, you can tell when they are scrambling to answer your question, and there's an indication that they're lying. Kind of the same techniques that police use to interrogate suspects.
Interview a mechanic. Treat your first oil change as an interview. Ask them to go back to the car, ask them to explain things, and see how they treat you during this first so-called interview. See if you're comfortable with their answers. Are you comfortable with the way that they explain things? Do you understand it? If you can say yes to all these things, then maybe it warrants a second visit. And slowly you'll begin to build up your trust.
Well, tell me a little bit about these classes that you run, because I know you do a car care class that's really cool, helping people figure out how to buy used cars, what to look for. I even saw you have a tire class, because like tires are this whole other animal, and I think I've probably written 10 articles and done 3 podcasts just on tires.
Yes. Tires are my first love um, in the car industry. So my automotive classes are not DIY at all. They are geared towards the average automotive driver, just your regular person who doesn't really think much about their car, gets into their car, drives to work, gets home, takes it into the repair shop every once in a while.
Well, there's DIY car repair these days is so much harder to do because the cars are more complicated.
Absolutely.
So, even just trying to change your own oil, first of all, it's just not, even if you can, it is just not worth your time and the effort then to dispose of it properly and to do it safely. It's just not worth it. And don't even get me started on, the computers that it takes to even talk to your car these days.
Right.
Holy cow.
The oil change service, not the cost of the oil in the filter, is generally around $20 to $30. And you're getting the service. You're often getting a tire rotation. You're getting a multi-point inspection. And all of that for the price of $20 to $30. Is it really worth your time and energy to do the oil change yourself? Usually it's not. The only time I've ever written about doing your own oil change was at the beginning of quarantine. When people weren't going to the shop and they were looking for projects to do that were safe and like social distance, I wrote about, hey, you could change your own oil yourself, and here are the different things you'd need in order to do that. But also, don't forget, you can really screw up your car if you do this wrong. So it's kind of at your own risk. But everybody gets to do the things on their car that they choose. I don't recommend that that's what you do, but it's an option out there if you want. So my classes are geared towards your regular everyday car driver. And what I do is I educate people, or rather I empower people to be more educated consumers. I help you understand the fundamentals of your car that you should know as a car owner. What are the different types of maintenance your car needs? What does power steering fluid do? What does your drive belt do? What's the difference between the different dash lights on your car? When a battery light goes on, does that mean your battery is bad? It's a basic overview, but it also offers you the places where you can find this information specific to your vehicle. So that would be like the whys and whens of car maintenance. And then I have the used car buying class. How the heck do I buy a used car? Which is probably my ultimate most liked and most in-demand class. And it goes through the car buying process from budgeting to determining the best car, to finding the vehicle, ultimately test driving it, inspecting it, taking it into a repair shop. And this is if you want to do it on your own. Some people, they take my class and they go, Chaya, I really don't want to do that. And either they go buy a new car, or
they call me.
They find you.
I do. And I love the people that come out of your class, because for me, they're a very educated customer, which makes my life easier because they don't have unrealistic expectations. And when I explain what I do, they're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what Chaya told me to do, but I don't really want to do it. So yes, please, here, do it for me.
Exactly. And that, just being a more educated consumer will help you in lots of different ways. My class on how to buy a used car is not just for people who are immediately today going to buy a used car. It's for people who have an older car that are thinking about replacing it in the next 5 years. And it helps, it translates into basic life skills. You should know how to find information on what cars are quality cars, what cars are better tested and rated, besides the information that everybody tells you. And then I teach you how to negotiate, your 2 main ways of negotiating, and how emotions play into negotiating, and all of these different things that just make you a more educated person, a more well-rounded person. And everybody who's come out of these classes for the most part has been like, wow, the amount of information that you could give me in 3, hour-long sessions is pretty phenomenal.
And it's a lot of information. I mean, we're on what? We're recording podcast number 65, and there are still, I never run out of topics to cover going into the details on this because there are so many things to know in the car buying world. I mean, I did 3 whole podcasts just on extended warranties.
Oh, you're the person I need to send people to. I don't talk about extended warranties. Last week when I did my last version of the How the Heck Do I Buy Used Car class, I had 120 people from across the United States and Canada, and budgets ranged from as low as $2,000 to as high as $30,000. And everybody has their own reason for taking this. Lots of people didn't learn from their parents because their parents didn't really know. Other people have bought cars and gotten burned badly. Other people were just getting their driver's license and were looking to not make mistakes that they've heard their peers make because, they're older and wiser.
And buying a $2,000 car is way harder than buying a $30,000 car because there's no such thing as a reliable $2,000 car. So the things you have to look for on that, it's, not that hard to buy a $30,000 car because you can get one that's got such low miles, it's still under warranty, and your risks are minimal. But a $2,000 car? Yeah, people are like, oh, yeah, I need a reliable $2,000 car. I'm like, okay, those two words don't belong in the same sentence.
You can still get the best car available for those $2,000.
Right. And you also need to be prepared that, okay, you're probably also going to then need to spend, maybe you need to buy a $1,200 car and put,
Exactly.
$600 or $700 into it because there's no such thing usually unless you find that one car that the little old lady drove and she was current on her maintenance, but she's had it for 30 years. Those are
Exactly.
rainbow colored, glitter covered unicorns. There are very few of them out there, especially in today's
And
market.
they're still found in the paper copies of the newspaper
They
that
still
most
have
people don't
those?
even look at. Yes. Leanne, I tell people when the smaller your budget, the more you have to look at the paper newspaper.
Yeah.
Because the classifieds still have the older customer who's either decided to invest in a car with much higher safety features, or they're no longer able to drive, or their spouse passed, and they're still listing the cars in the paper.
Right. They don't know what Craigslist is.
Exactly. And if they do know what Craigslist is, they've put their car up on Craigslist. Lots of folks my age don't look at Craigslist anymore because they think Craigslist is obsolete. But that's not accurate.
Yeah, and there's a lot of crap out there too.
Right. But the people who have just finally learned how to use Craigslist are not putting their car on Facebook Marketplace. They're putting their car on Craigslist. So don't skip all the steps. The less money you have, the more you have to look at all the different options and have patience to find the right thing for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I tell people. You've just, because obviously I don't buy cars in that price range. It doesn't make any sense. But, I tell people here's where you're going to have to look, and you're going to have to pound the pavement, and you need to set aside a certain amount, several $100s for pre-purchase inspections. Cause it may take more than one. It may take 2 or 3 cars to find the right one that that you can afford to buy and needs the minimal amount of work to be safe to drive. So
absolutely. I completely agree with you that there's just so many factors that go into buying a car that most people never even consider. The biggest question I get after the should I shop at CarMax question, the second biggest question I get is, Kaya, how am I going to take the car to a mechanic? How are they going to let me do that? And that's where we have to take our power as the customer.
Right? Yeah.
We're there with our money going to buy what is, in most cases, the second largest investment we will make in our lives.
Yep. After our home.
Our house, this is the second largest investment that you will make when you go and buy a car. And if the dealership or the individual is so against you taking the car to a mechanic, that's a car I don't want to buy.
Don't buy it.
Yeah, walk away from that car. And I mean, yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now and it's a little bit different, but still, There should be a way that you could take the car to a mechanic. You let me know about the Lemon Squad. I tell people about that all the time. I would still prefer you take the car to a mechanic if you can, and if you feel safe doing that with all the different factors in play. But that's a great second option. And as an analytical person, I love that the Lemon Squad gives you a very detailed report, even more detailed than mechanic will. But they can't put the car up on a lift and check the suspension the same way that you could at a shop.
If you can get it up on a lift at your own mechanic and you have a mechanic that you trust, then that's fantastic. Obviously there's no 100% way to eliminate the risk of buying a used car. It's a used car. That's why you pay less money than buying a new car. But these days, it's not like you're risk-free on a new one.
But you can check all the right boxes and make sure you do your due diligence, and that's the best you can do.
Absolutely. Well, I know you've got a new class that you're just coming up with, that you're launching very soon, that's specifically for teens and young adults. What is the information that you are kind of tailoring to that particular age group that's a little bit different than, us 40 somethings?
I love this new class. When somebody suggested the idea to me, sort of not really, more like, I'd love to have this class that my teen can take for my maintenance class or my car class. And I was like, I should come up with a class for teens and young adults, because I was a teen and I was a young adult, and I was a person who didn't have a huge support network, who went to buy my first car, and the first day I bought my car, the car stopped. It wouldn't turn on. It was like a huge situation. And I did everything right. I took the car to a mechanic. I got everything checked out. Nobody could have anticipated that the fuel pump was going to go bad.
Oh, yeah.
The third time of me taking it into the shop and them telling me again and again that it was the battery, which it wasn't.
No.
By then I was like, something's very wrong here. So, this class, not only does it take the best information from all my classes, it thinks back to when I was a teen. What is those most important things that I wish somebody had taught me? For example, how do I know when I should tow my car instead of drive it?
Oh, that's a good one.
If your teen is driving your car, even if you're not buying them a car and you don't anticipate them having a car until they're 18 or 19 or 20, if your teen is driving your car and something happens to your car, how does your teen know? If the check engine light is on, does it mean that you should pull over and get a tow truck and, call your mom and get a tow truck? Or does it mean you can continue driving the car until you get to the house and then deal with it? Well, if the check engine light's flashing, you should absolutely pull over, because by the time you get to your parents' house, your parents may need to be replacing their car.
Right. Yeah. If it's flashing, that means stop now. I get that question from adults all the time.
Exactly. So if you can teach the teens these simple, fundamental car principles from day one, from the time they're getting their driver's license, and even beginning to consider the possibility of car ownership in the future, this is exactly what that class does. Is it prepares them and teaches them the fundamental information that you need to know. Is it, does it cover everything? No, but it covers all of these basic things that you'd be like, oh, I wish I knew that.
Right. And it sounds very similar to the class that I teach for the Girl Scouts, because there is a car care merit badge in the Girl Scouts nowadays. I wish they'd had that when I was a Girl Scout. And it's a very similar class. Some people, because the Girl Scouts partner with folks all over the country, whoever's in their area, to teach that class. And a lot of the shops that teach it are trying to teach them how to change your own oil. It's more DIY. And I agree with you. That's not realistic, especially for a teenager. You want to teach them the safety. You want to help them understand their car. And quite frankly, step one is teaching them that having a car, first of all, is a privilege. And if you have that privilege, owning a car is about a lot more than just putting gas in it.
Right.
Even if your mom and dad are being really nice and paying for the car and paying your astronomical insurance rates, it is still your job to take care of that car. You have to know, you have to change the oil, you have to change the fluids, understanding about your tires. So,
exactly.
that's great.
And, checking your tire pressure is going to prevent blowouts.
Oh my God, I preach that. Preach it, girl, preach it.
Exactly. Be a more educated car driver. It's going to make you a safer driver ultimately. Does every single thing related to safety? No, it's not. But at the end of the day, understanding your car better is going to make you a safer driver. And this class, all of the classes that I teach are virtual, and I've taught at the University of California, I've taught at libraries, and I have libraries scheduled throughout the country throughout the rest of the year. So the classes that I offer for the most part are virtual. So it allows teens to listen and learn this class from wherever they're most comfortable, where they don't have to necessarily interact with other people and deal with with the other social pressures that come into play with having these types of courses in a more public setting. And that means that anybody across the country can have access to information, not just about cars, but from a woman and from a queer woman and from somebody who can explain it in a way that they're going to understand it, and not from your local mechanic that will, teach you how to change your oil, which you're never going to do ever again.
Exactly. And I love that it's virtual, especially with everything that's going on right now. But my favorite question to ask the teens when I teach the Girl Scout class is, what is the single most important safety feature in any car? And you know what I'm talking about, right? The driver. And it's so funny, they guess all these things and stuff. I've only had one young lady respond with the driver, and she got a big prize in that class. So
right, because if you know your car and you understand how your car operates, you're the first line of defense.
Right, and it's your primary responsibility as the operator of this, large machine that can be used as a weapon if you're not careful, to operate it responsibly. So, of course, we have to do the preaching about no cell phone and all that good stuff in the car and distractions.
But also, I've had customers that play their radio really loud in their car every single day, from the moment they turn on their car to the moment they turn off their car. And I understand that, some people love music, but just remember, turn off your music for a couple minutes every day and listen to your car.
Right. You cannot hear that weird noise if you're blasting the radio.
Exactly. And your brakes might be grinding and you still won't hear it because you're blaring the music in your car, which is fine if you set aside a few minutes to listen to your car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when is this class launching? And if people are interested in taking your classes in general, where do they go? What do they do?
So my website is mechanicshopfemme.com. That's FEMME. And when you get there, you can explore the whole site. Or if you're looking directly for the classes, it's mechanicshoffemme.com/cars-made-easy. And this teen class is in October. All of my classes are taught live and recorded live. So it is taught in a way that you can interact with me and you can ask questions and have a good understanding of the information that I'm offering you. But you can also go back and rewatch the class at your convenience because you're not going to be able to retain all that information at once.
Right.
So the live session is in late October. You can find it on my website. It is limited amounts of people in it because it's personalized, and I do expect it to sell out very quickly. So that's available for you. I also have all the rest of my classes listed on my site.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening to The Straight Shift. If you are interested in one of Chaya's car care classes, be sure to check out her website, mechanicshopfemme.com. And if you decide you want to take her used car buying class, or you know how to get a hold of me if you ever have any questions, or if you need her contact information, you can always reach out to me too at thecarchick.com. Everybody, be safe out there. Stay cool. We're out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright Leanne Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of Leanne Shattuck or The Car Chick.